So today we're going to be shading a sphere with a light source from the right side. You're going to need your pencil, eraser, and your sketchbook. Divide your sketchbook in half, and we're going to be working on the left side so that you can draw your own on the right later. The sphere is probably going to be one of the hardest ones that we shade because there's a lot of extra things that go into shading a sphere. First thing we want to do is draw a circle. Now, if you have something that you can trace that will fit on this side of your paper, go ahead and trace that. But I am going to attempt to draw a circle without that. So the way I do that is I do little strokes and I kind of let the natural movement of my hand define those strokes. And I'm just going to do this all the way around until I meet back. And I may have to adjust a little bit once I'm done. You don't want this to be too big or it will take you a really long time to shade. So don't find something too large to trace. Now, if you're doing this by hand, I know it's not going to be perfect. You are not a machine. So that's pretty close. Again, it's not perfect, but it's close. I'm going to clean it up just a little bit, just so my lines aren't quite so thick. So now we have our circle drawn and we can start shading it to look like a sphere. But first we need our light source. Our light source is going to be from the right, so go ahead and draw that. Now, I know I've been saying draw or shade in two directions. You're like, how do I know what two directions to shade in? So when we look at a sphere like this ball, we know that it curves this way, it curves this way, it curves pretty much any direction you look at it. But when we start shading, we are going to think of it as it's curving this way and it's curving this way. But like with the cone, when we had to do the fan shading, that same thought process is going to apply with our sphere. All right, for our first direction of shading, we are going to shade this way. So to do that, we're going to have the middle, which will be straight up and down. But as we move, kind of like if you were drawing a basketball or if you were looking at a basketball and the way the lines on a basketball go, as we move to the left, you're going to start curving until you match the curve of the circle. Same thing on the right. You're going to start curving it until it matches the curve of the circle. So the right side is going to be the lightest side, so we know that the left side needs to be darker. Now I'm just going to find the middle of my sphere and just kind of start there. And again, I'm just doing this really lightly, but I know that as I move over to this left side, I can start making it darker. And again, I'm keeping the side of my lead on my paper so I get nice smooth shading and I don't press too hard. Now, as I start going the other direction, I'm keeping it super light because this side is closest to the light and needs to be the lightest, but I'm still curving it as I get closer to the edge. Now we have to go with the other direction of shading. So we've gone up and down and curved out. Now we're gonna go sideways and start curving out the same way as we did before. Start curving it as you move away from that center until you match the curve of the sphere. Now here's our center. I'm not drawing it too dark because I know that this needs to stay light. So I'm just gonna do a very, very light layer to begin with. I'm not even going all the way over yet. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, and then I'll worry about darkening it just a little bit. Right now, I'm just trying to get that basic shading in. Now, one thing that I want to add to this is our light source is coming directly from the right. So what's actually happening is the center part here is gonna be a little bit lighter than the edges. So I'm actually gonna wanna darken these edges just a little bit on the top and the bottom towards the left. And then I'm also darkening the left side as well. But you can see I've brought in some darkness up here. I'm gonna do the same down here, and it's gonna create like this C shape. Again, I'm still following the curve of the sphere as I do this. Now I just want to go in and clean all of this up just a little bit. You can start shading in the other direction again if you need to. Smooth this side out just a little bit. Now, I have the basic shading done. If I want to, I can go back in with my eraser and add a highlight. You don't have to do that, but remember that highlights can be pretty much anywhere based on where you are viewing it from. So if you want to add a highlight, go ahead. If you don't, that's okay too. So for our shadow, because the light is coming from here, our shadow is going to be a little bit underneath and out towards the back. And remember that ellipse we drew with the cylinder? You're gonna draw that same shape for the shadow of your sphere. Now, the higher the light is, the more shadow is gonna be on this side, but because the light is lower, there's less shadow on this side. Now remember that our shadow is gonna be darkest right underneath. So you want it to be darker than the darkest part of your shading on the sphere. So I'm just going in and making this super dark, and then I can start fading it out from that dark part. And there's your shadow. So once you have your shadow drawn, remember that reflective light bounces off the surface and goes back and hits your sphere. So we are just going to add a little bit of reflective light towards the bottom of our sphere that is bouncing off of this table. So when we do that, I'm just gonna go in and kind of erase this half moon shape that follows the curve of my sphere towards the bottom. And there you have your little bit of reflective light. And there you have your sphere. Now, what you need to do is draw your own sphere on this side of your paper. Spelled that wrong. Choose a different light source. It cannot be from the right. So move your light source to the upper right corner, to straight above, to the left side, wherever, as long as it's not from this right side. So draw your sphere on the right side of your paper in your sketchbook, and good luck.